What a day. Well, hello YouTubers, and welcome back to the Holtz Mitchell channel and this second episode of Janky Setups. Today we're going to be going after this pivot arm up here in this trim saw. Now this is a trim saw that keeps pace with an extruded plastic part and cuts it off as it's coming out of the extruder after it's been cooled. The whole thing is just totally wore out, and so it's time to rebuild it. And we're going to bore this and get some reference surfaces on here. We've got one surface right here. You can't really see it. I'll bring the camera in a little closer here a little bit later. But we got to get some reference surfaces on this thing so that we can get this thing lined up, bored, and bushed. That's what I was looking for. It's been a long day. It's been hot. It's been humid. As you can tell by my voice, the hay fever's been bothering me a little bit. So yeah, things aren't the rosiest right now. But anyway, first we're going to put some reference surfaces on this, and then go from there, and then set it up on the mill in the vertical position to bore it, like right here. Now, as you can see in the setup part of it, we took a hairline square and got the part lined up as it was mounted on the holder, the work holder. And now this worked really good for the other little piece up here. There's another little piece way up in there that holds the pneumatic cylinder, and that didn't require a whole lot of a craziness. We saw that in the last episode, and it really didn't flex much or vibrate much. Now in here, watch this. As you can see, there's about 2/10 of gyration that the part is making at the base. I don't know what it was up at the top where the work was actually being performed. So I had to make some fairly small cuts, about 1/10 of a millimeter at a time, so that's 2/10 on the diameter. Here it is in inches. And so the other thing was the tool was a little dull, and this is being cast steel, I think. Could have been cast iron, I'm not sure. It didn't behave much like cast iron. It behaved more like cast steel. And so it was a little bit tough, tougher than cast iron and tougher than steel. So I'm not sure what this thing is made of, but let me tell you, it was a real pain in the butt. So here we're boring it out and getting ready for the bushings. And the final step is to plane that, just like we did on the holder for the pneumatic cylinder, like right here. And so we did that on both ends. Now, the other thing was I left the bushings undersized on the bore, and the reason for that is once you put a bushing into a part like this, there's no guarantee of alignment. You might be able to get it if you're lucky. You could probably fit it on a shaft, stick it in there, and kind of finagle it in there, and then you're going to wind up with binding issues. And so I wanted to avoid that. And the boring bar that I have for my boring head, it just won't reach through. This is 10 inches in length on this thing. So I wound up making a boring bar on the lathe and putting this all up on the lathe like right here. Now the boring bar didn't work out as I had hoped. It was fraught with some problems. One, the diameter of the bar itself wasn't rigid enough to withstand the pressure from the tool, and so I was taking a real small cut anyway, I think 1/10 of a millimeter or something like that. It wasn't much, but yet I was getting chatter and it was just vibrating like crazy, and I just could not get a smooth finish. So I tore that down, and then we went to this. So what we did is we took the chuck off, stuck a Morse taper 6 adapter into the cone of or into the spindle, and then stuck a long drill. I have a 24 millimeter overlength drill, and so we pre-bored it to 24 millimeters. Then we stuck it back on, a reverse like this. And so we could get the one end aligned with the 24 millimeter bore, and then just kind of had to eyeball it. It just kind of the way it worked out. I didn't have any means of really feeding any kind of shim stock in there or anything like that. So we kind of had to eyeball it. It worked out pretty good in the end, and then so we drilled it out 25 millimeters on both ends, using the same setup, and so it worked out pretty good. Now I didn't have a reamer that would ream that in that length. I'm probably going to get a 25 millimeter O-length drill because that is a nominal size, and I encounter that on a multitude of occasions so far, so it's probably going to be one of those investments. Going to have to make it sooner or later.
Guten Morgen. Moin. Micha, wo ist dein Schweißgerät?
Какой?
Вот это.
So anyway, we got this thing all back together, and yeah, it should perform as intended. Got some Zerks put in places, got some bushings on the shaft up here, so the head can't wander back and forth, because like I said, this saw keeps pace and then it comes back, and when it slams into the stop, the head has a tendency to wander, and the rings that were on here, the snap rings that were on the shaft, busted. They just went all over the place. They weren't holding the head in its original position, and so when you get a hard hit like that repeatedly every day, hundreds of times, something's going to give somewhere. And so these snap rings are not real, they're tough, but they're not that tough. So I decided we'll put some caps on the end with a cone, and then that way with a taper, so that way, and then shortened up the shaft, so that way because this hole was oblong, or the other one of the holes was oblong. And so in order to center up the shaft and not have to put this whole box on the mill and drill it out and put new bushings in it and yada yada yada, the tapered the cone cap here seemed to be the better option, and seems to be working pretty good. So we'll see how it turns out. Put some Loctite on it later on once it's in place, so that way the bolts can't work their way out from the impact of the thing going back and forth. So let me bring the camera around here and show you guys what all we've done to this thing. Okay, so here's first thing we did was establish a reference surface that we have some alignment that we can parallel the sleeve up here. Now here's our bushings out of aluminum back left and right. And there is a Zerk on the top side. You can't see it from over here, so that way the thing can be lubed at any time. Then here for the other shaft that this thing rides back and forth on, we put some Zerks in here, new shaft. Here's our little wing ding thingy that we saw in the first episode, and we had to pin this because the person that had worked on this previously, well, let's just say he was quite the magician, and nothing fit when it went back together, even though I was maintaining the same measurements on all the parts when they came out. And so we had to wind up turning this shoulder off, and because this is a press fit in this sleeve right here, we wound up wearing out the sleeve, and it's a little loose, so then we put a roll pin in there to hold that shaft in. And so then we come around here. Here's our tapered caps. Now the tapers, goes in towards like one of these tapered screws here, tapered head. And this is a 25 millimeter shaft. So on the small diameter, I made it 24 millimeters, and then just raised it out, I think 4. So that way it had some room to go in there and center up the shaft and pull it tight. And we got another hole down here. Over here, the guides. This is all going to get set up. The blade's just kind of sticking out because of the there's no pressure on the cylinder up here. Here's that pneumatic cylinder. This thing has about 4 pneumatic cylinders, so they're all going to get put back on. We'll once the electrician's been in here and gets this thing running again, we'll show you guys what this thing how it operates. Well, YouTubers, I hope you were able to glean a little useful information out of this little episode today. Now, granted, this is not the way you should do this on a regular basis. If you have other means of boring this, I just don't have a boring bar that I can use to bore this thing and you know, do it the conventional way. So I had to resort to some pretty janky methods here in order to make this work. I'm still lacking quite a few tools in here in order to, you know, get the job done, but you know, it's getting done regardless. So my setup square, it's set up for, you know, relatively dainty parts. But, you know, the big heavy stuff like this, of course, it's going to be a challenge. And, of course, when the cutting tool's dull, what can I say? So, anyway, there's some principles here that probably would apply to some projects you may have in the future. If you've got any questions on this thing, by all means, fire away in the comment section below, because there's going to be some times where you might have, you know, a similar setup where you have a sliding shaft and you're trying to figure out how to make it work. So anyway, if you have any thoughts, comments, critiques, or suggestions, by all means, put them in the comment section below. Help feed the algorithm a little bit, all that good jazz. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to, you know, rate and subscribe and all that good stuff. So anyway, with that, thanks for stopping by, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you all again soon in the next video.